Alert signals blared through the crystalline corridors of monitoring station Zenith 7, their piercing wails shattering the usual serenity of deep space surveillance. Senior Technician Ravopex's four hands danced across the holographic interface, each appendage trembling as they confirmed and reconfirmed the readings. By the 7 moons, Ravo whispered, his bioluminescent spots pulsing with anxiety. They're moving. They're actually moving. The main display showed hundreds of ships, emerging from the Sol system like a swarm of angry hornets. Each vessel bristled with weapons that made even the most hardened military analyst wake up in cold sweats. "Get me Admiral Lyra Nex." Now Ravo's voice cracked as he shouted to his subordinates. Within moments, the commanding presence of Admiral Lyra Nex filled the central communication hub. Her silvery scales shimmered under the emergency lights, and her ceremonial head crest was slightly askew, suggesting she'd been roused from her sleep cycle. "Report, Technician Peck," she commanded, adjusting her formal uniform with her lower arms while her upper ones clasped behind her back. "Admiral, the humans, their entire 3rd and 4th battle fleets have broken orbit. They're moving in formation toward the Orion Arm. We're detecting energy signatures consistent with their Mark VI planet crackers." A heavy silence fell over the monitoring station. Admiral Nex's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of deep concentration among her species. "Show me the vector analysis." The holographic display shifted, revealing a glowing red line that curved through dozens of star systems. Nex's head crest flattened against her skull, a physiological response her species had evolved to prepare for imminent danger. "Alert the Council," she ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation, "and get me a direct channel to Supreme Commander Talus. We need to mobilize the defense fleet immediately." The council chambers erupted into chaos as the news spread. Representatives from 17 species talked over each other, their various appendages gesticulating wildly. Some species were literally climbing the walls in panic, while others had entered defensive hibernation states. "Order. I demand order," Council Leader Zena Val's voice boomed through the chamber, her photosynthetic tendrils glowing bright red with authority. "Admiral Nex, please continue your briefing." Nex stood at the center of the chamber, her holographic projection towering over the assembled representatives. "The human fleet moves with purpose. Their formation suggests this isn't a training exercise. Based on their current trajectory, they could reach any of our core worlds within 7 standard cycles." "But why now?" asked Representative Koro, his crystalline form vibrating with concern. "We've maintained a careful distance since the classification treaty." "Perhaps," Nex replied, allowing a touch of sarcasm to enter her voice. "Classifying their entire species as Deathworlders and treating them like rabid predators wasn't our most diplomatic moment." Nervous laughter rippled through the chamber. Even in crisis, the Admiral's notorious dry wit couldn't be suppressed. "We need options," Council Leader Val declared. "Admiral Nex, you've studied human military doctrine more than anyone. What are we dealing with?" Nex's head crest rose slightly, a gesture of professional pride. "The humans are descendants of pursuit predators. They don't just attack, they chase, they persist, they endure. And right now they're moving with the same determination their ancestors used to run down prey until it collapsed from exhaustion." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species present had evolved to either flee or fight quickly. The concept of simply continuing, relentlessly, until victory was achieved, it was terrifyingly alien. "Stars help us all," muttered Representative Koro, his crystalline form dimming with dread. Admiral Nex's next words cut through the growing panic like a plasma blade through vacuum. "I recommend we attempt communication before they enter our territory. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well try talking first." The sarcasm in her voice wasn't lost on anyone, but neither was the wisdom in her words. As the council descended into heated debate about the proper response, Nex's private communicator chirped with an urgent message from monitoring station Zenith 7. The humans were accelerating. Admiral Lyra Nex stood before the massive archive display in her private quarters, reviewing the first contact records. The ambient light pulsed softly, reflecting off her scales as she flicked through historical documents with practiced precision. "Computer, Display file HX 2994 initial species assessment, she commanded. The holographic display shimmered, revealing footage from humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. Nex allowed herself a small smile as she watched the human representative, Amanda Torres, accidentally crush a ceremonial greeting orb designed to withstand the strength of the galaxy's most powerful species. Who would have guessed their so-called average grip strength would shatter our strongest crystalline alloys, Nex muttered to herself, remembering the panic that incident caused. The Council's material scientists had spent decades developing those orbs. Her communication panel chimed. "Admiral, the Council requests your presence for an emergency briefing on human biological capabilities. Tell them I'll be there shortly. And please, someone remember to reinforce the chairs this time." The Council chamber had been modified since the last human diplomatic visit. The structural supports now incorporated reinforced titanium alloys, after an enthusiastic human delegate had accidentally leaned too hard against a support column and compromised the entire room's integrity. Council Leader Val's tendrils swayed nervously as she addressed the gathered representatives. "Let us review what we know about these Deathworlders." The central display activated, showing a human running a marathon. Several Council members instinctively backed away, despite it being just a recording. As we all remember, Nex began her presentation. Our initial classification of humans as Deathworlders came after our survey teams discovered their entertainment videos. We mistook their horror movies for historical documents. Nervous laughter rippled through the chamber. That particular misunderstanding had led to a rather embarrassing series of diplomatic incidents. But their actual capabilities proved nearly as frightening, she continued. They can repair broken bones, regenerate damaged tissue, and survive radiation levels that would liquidate most species. Their endurance alone qualifies them as apex predators by our standards. Representative Koro's crystalline form vibrated with anxiety. Remember the sporting event incident? When that human athlete broke the sound barrier without technological assistance? Yes, though they keep insisting it was just a sneeze, Nex replied dryly. Their ability to expel small particles at supersonic velocities remains one of their more disturbing traits. The display shifted to show human medical records. Several Council members turned various shades of distress as they observed humans naturally healing from injuries that would have ended most species. But perhaps most terrifying, Nex continued, her head crest rising to emphasize the point, is their psychological resilience. They laugh at things that should traumatize them. They seek out dangerous situations for something they call fun, and they form emotional attachments to literally anything. Remember the cleaning robot incident? Representative Mira chimed in, her feathers ruffling. An entire human space station refused to upgrade their maintenance units because the crew had named them and considered them pets. Precisely, Nex agreed. Which brings us to our current situation. In all our previous encounters, humans have demonstrated one consistent trait: they are terrifyingly unpredictable. The display showed footage from the infamous Proxima trading post incident, where a lone human merchant had accidentally started a revolution by introducing the concept of workers' rights to a hive mind species. They can turn anything into a weapon, Council Leader Val noted, her tendrils drooping, even abstract concepts. And yet, Nex added, her voice taking on a thoughtful tone, they show remarkable restraint most of the time. Despite their physical capabilities, they've never initiated hostile action against any Council species. Tell that to my fourth arm, shouted a voice from the back. That human female nearly ripped it off. As I recall, Nex replied, unable to hide her amusement, you had mistaken her elaborate head decoration for a parasitic infection and tried to remove it. She was simply demonstrating what humans call a reflexive response. The Council chambers filled with murmurs as members recalled their own encounters with humans. Stories circulated about their bizarre abilities surviving in temperatures that should cook their proteins, continuing to fight with multiple bone fractures, and most disturbingly, their habit of adopting dangerous predators as companions. And now Nex concluded, her voice growing serious, this species that can survive almost anything, befriend almost anything, and turn almost anything into a weapon is moving their battle fleets toward our territory. The silence that followed was deafening. Perhaps, suggested Representative Koro hopefully, They're just looking for new things to befriend." The nervous laughter that followed was cut short by another urgent alert from monitoring station Zenith 7. The urgent alert from monitoring station Zenith 7 flashed across the council chamber's main display. Human fleet has increased velocity by 47%. Estimated arrival time revised to 4 standard cycles. Admiral Lyra Nex felt her head crest flatten automatically. She recognized the acceleration pattern. It matched perfectly with the human battle doctrine of rapid response deployment. Perhaps now would be a good time to discuss what actually happened during the trade negotiations. Council Leader Val suggested, her tendrils turning a pale shade of guilty green. Nex turned to face the council, her scales reflecting the emergency lights in a way that made several representatives flinch. "You mean the negotiations none of you bothered to tell me about until after they collapsed?" The chamber grew uncomfortably quiet. Even the typically chatty maintenance drones seemed to sense the tension and retreated to their charging stations. In my defense, Representative Mira spoke up, preening her feathers nervously. "How was I supposed to know that offering them coffee beans in exchange for fusion technology would be taken as an insult?" Because Nex replied, pulling up the trade documentation, "You offered them their own coffee beans, the ones you bought from their outer colonies at premium prices, marked up by 3,000%, and tried to sell back to them as, and I quote, exotic alien consumables." Several council members had the grace to look embarrassed, their various physiological features displaying shame in a rainbow of alien expressions. The coffee incident wasn't the real problem, though, was it? Nex continued, her voice carrying just enough sarcasm to make the council squirm. "No, the real diplomatic disaster came during the celebratory dinner." Representative Koro's crystalline form clouded with embarrassment. The human ambassador seemed to enjoy the entertainment. The entertainment next brought up another recording. "You mean when you displayed footage of their military training exercises, added dramatic music, and presented it as a horror show called Terran Monsters, when death walks on 2 legs?" The recording played, showing human Marines performing standard physical training exercises while ominous music played in the background. A voiceover, clearly done by someone who thought they were being clever, narrated, "Watch as the Deathworlders demonstrate their terrifying ability to lift objects many times their own mass. Notice how they continue moving long after normal species would have collapsed from exhaustion." The background music was quite catchy, offered one of the junior representatives weakly. "The humans didn't think so," Nex countered. "Especially when you got to the part about their young practicing ritual combat in something called a playground." The recording shifted to show human children playing on a swing set, while the narrator gravely intoned about training their young to defy gravity through repeated exposure to controlled falling. Council Leader Val's tendrils twisted in embarrassment. "We may have misinterpreted some cultural contexts." May have Nex clicked her mandibles in exasperation. "You classified their educational facilities as combat training grounds. You labeled their medical centers as biological enhancement facilities. And somehow someone decided their food preservation technology was actually a weapons program called Project Freeze Ray. Those human popsicles do look suspiciously weapon-like," muttered someone in the back. Nex ignored the comment and continued. "But none of that compares to what happened when Ambassador Torres tried to explain the misunderstanding." The chamber grew even quieter. Everyone remembered that particular incident. "Would someone like to explain to me?" Nex asked, her voice dangerously calm, "why our automated defense systems classified the ambassador's laughter as a sonic attack. The frequencies matched our criteria for biological warfare," protested the head of security, his protective plates clicking nervously. "And when she started slapping her knee, our threat assessment systems registered it as self-harm." "So naturally," Nex continued, "you responded by activating the emergency containment protocols." The recording showed Ambassador Torres being suddenly encased in protective foam as alarms blared. The humans' continued laughter, now muffled by the safety foam, only caused more systems to activate. In retrospect, Council Leader Val admitted, having the safety systems respond to continued laughter with additional layers of containment foam may have been an overreaction. In an overreaction, Nex's head crest rose in disbelief. "By the time we managed to shut down the automated systems, we'd used up 3 years' worth of safety foam, and the ambassador had to be cut out of a cocoon the size of a small shuttle. She seemed very understanding about it, someone offered hopefully. Oh yes, she was understanding right up until someone called in a quarantine team because they thought her red face meant she was suffering from some sort of toxic exposure. The council chamber erupted in a chaos of defensive explanations and accusations. Some representatives insisted they had only followed standard safety protocols, while others blamed outdated threat assessment algorithms. And now Nex raised her voice over the commotion. Less than one standard rotation after this diplomatic disaster, the human battle fleet is heading straight for us. A new alert flashed across the displays. The human fleet had once again increased speed. They're not just moving, Nex observed, studying the tactical display. They're moving with purpose. Those formations, they're in full combat stance. Could they be planning to demand an apology? Asked Representative Lyra hopefully. With enough firepower to reduce a solar system to its component atoms, Nex's scales shifted to a darker hue. That's not an apology mission. That's an extinction-level event in transit. Council Leader Val's tendrils had gone almost white with stress. What are our options? Well, Nex replied, checking the latest sensor data, we could try actually talking to them. Maybe find out why they're really coming. You know, basic diplomacy? The thing we should have done before creating a documentary about their terrifying ability to recover from minor wounds. Before anyone could respond, every display in the chamber suddenly lit up with a new alert. The message was simple, but its implications were anything but. Incoming transmission from Human Fleet Priority Ultra. The council chamber's atmosphere could have been cut with a plasma knife as Admiral Lyra Nex authorized the incoming transmission. The massive central display flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the human flagship. Fleet Admiral Rebecca Sterling's face filled the screen, her expression tense but professional. What caught everyone's attention, however, was her disheveled appearance. Her uniform showed signs of recent combat, and a bandage adorned her left temple. This is Fleet Admiral Sterling of the United Earth Defense Force. We've received your distress signal and are responding at maximum speed. Hold out as long as you can. We're coming. The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Nex's head crest rose in puzzlement. Distress signal? We haven't sent any. Another alert cut through the chaos, this time from a completely different sector of space. Admiral Senior Technician Ravo's voice crackled through the emergency channel. We're detecting massive spatial distortions in the Carina sector. Something's coming through. The tactical display shifted, showing a tear in space-time large enough to swallow a small moon. Through it poured ships of a design that made Nex's scales turn pale. No, she whispered. They're not due for another 1,000 years. The Harvesters' Council Leader Val's tendrils writhed in terror. They're early. The human admiral's voice cut through the growing panic. We picked up their quantum wake 3 days ago. Your automated beacons have been broadcasting distress signals across all frequencies since they arrived. Didn't you receive them? Representative Koro's crystalline form vibrated in realization. The safety protocols. After the diplomatic incident, we raised all our security filters to maximum. The system must have classified the emergency signals as potential threats and blocked them. Nex quickly accessed the security logs. There it was, thousands of blocked automated distress calls, all tagged as potentially harmful communication attempts due to their high energy signatures. Let me get this straight, Admiral Sterling said, her voice carrying a mix of disbelief and amusement. You accidentally blocked your own distress signals because you were too worried about us being dangerous. In our defense, Nex replied, her own sense of irony kicking in. Your species does have a concerning habit of surviving things that should definitely kill you. An explosion rocked Sterling's ship, momentarily disrupting the transmission. When it stabilized, more human crew members could be seen rushing around in the background, handling damage control with practiced efficiency. Speaking of surviving, Sterling grinned, wiping blood from a fresh cut on her cheek. We've been engaging their advanced scouts for the past 12 hours. Nasty pieces of work. But we figured out their shield harmonics, sending the data now. The Council's tactical officers stared in shock at the incoming information. The Harvesters had always been considered invincible, their technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. How did you Representative Mira's feathers puffed in astonishment? Those shields have resisted all analysis for millennia. Oh, that Sterling shrugged while directing her crew to return fire at an unseen enemy. One of our science officers noticed their shields flicker when exposed to concentrated coffee vapors, something about the molecular structure interfacing with their quantum fields. After that, it was just a matter of weaponizing our break room. The council members exchanged bewildered looks. The humans had defeated an ancient defense system with their breakfast beverages? We also found out they really don't like cat videos. Another human officer chimed in from off-screen. Their neural networks crash when trying to process why we keep tiny predators as companions. Nex's tactical training kicked in as she processed this information. You're saying you've been fighting an advanced alien invasion force with coffee and cat videos. Among other things, Sterling confirmed, then barked orders for evasive maneuvers. Turns out they're not big fans of human music either. Something about our rhythmic patterns disrupting their hive mind connectivity. We've been blasting classic rock through their command frequencies. Just then, the massive display split to show the Harvester fleet's advancement. Their ships moved with perfect geometric precision, a sight that had terrified countless civilizations throughout history. But as Nex watched, that precision began to falter as human ships darted between their formations, broadcasting what the tactical computer identified as something called back in black at frequencies that shouldn't have been possible in space. You turned your entire fleet into a weapon. By Nex's head crest twitched in disbelief, playing music at them. And showing them pictures of our pets, added an enthusiastic human communications officer. The real damage happened when we started sending them videos of people cooking. They just couldn't process why we deliberately set things on fire and then put them in our mouths. Council Leader Val's tendrils had tied themselves in confused knots. You're fighting an ancient horror with recipes. To be fair, Sterling replied, directing her ship through another evasive maneuver. Human cooking techniques do look pretty terrifying out of context, especially phlegm. The tactical display updated again, showing the Harvester fleet's increasing disarray. Ships that had moved in perfect formation for millennia were now breaking ranks, their patterns disrupted by what appeared to be a concentrated broadcast of cooking shows, cat videos, and something labeled greatest guitar solos of the 20th century. Nex felt her understanding of the universe shift as she watched the humans systematically dismantle the galaxy's greatest threat with what essentially amounted to their entertainment programming. This is why you're all so resilient, she realized aloud. Your entire species evolved by turning everything, literally everything, into either a tool or a joke. Pretty much, Sterling agreed, then shouted, hit them with the compilation of babies laughing at dogs. That really scrambles their targeting systems. The council chamber watched in amazement as the dreaded Harvester fleet, terror of galaxies, began to retreat from what their sensors indicated was a massive broadcast of infant humans producing high-pitched vocalizations at domesticated canines. Admiral Nex, Sterling called out as her fleet pressed their advantage, we could use some help coordinating this defense. Your species' sonic capabilities combined with our psychological warfare techniques could end this threat once and for all. What do you say? Want to help us weaponize joy? Nex looked around the council chamber, at all the species who had feared humanity's capabilities, and saw a new understanding dawn in their various physiological expressions. The humans weren't terrifying because they were inherently dangerous, they were terrifying because they could turn anything, even happiness itself, into a force to be reckoned with. Council Leader Val Nex turned, her scales shimmering with anticipation. I believe it's time we reconsidered our classification of humans. Agreed. Val's tendrils had finally unknotted themselves. Anyone who can defeat cosmic horror with cooking shows clearly deserves a category of their own. Great Sterling's voice carried both enthusiasm and the sound of ongoing battle. Now, who wants to help us compile a playlist? We're thinking of following up our rock barrage with some jazz. Let's see how their hive mind handles improvisation. The next few hours in council space would go down in galactic history as the Symphony of Chaos, though the humans insisted on calling it the greatest hits battle. Admiral Lyra Nex stood at her command station, coordinating the combined fleet's efforts with a precision that would have made her Academy instructors proud. The humans had integrated their ships into the Council defense grid with surprising ease, their seemingly random attack patterns somehow matching perfectly with the coordinated movements of the Council ships. "Fire Sonic Pulse Pattern Beta 7," Nex commanded, her scales gleaming under the tactical displays. Her species' natural ability to produce complex harmonics had found an unexpected application in warfare. The Council ships released a synchronized wave of sonic energy, carefully tuned to the frequency the humans had discovered. As the wave hit the Harvester ships, Admiral Sterling's fleet followed up with their own unique addition to the attack. Now playing Bohemian Rhapsody, synchronized with cat videos and clips from competitive cooking shows, Sterling announced with far too much enthusiasm for someone in the middle of a space battle. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Harvester ships, already struggling with the sonic assault, completely lost formation as their neural networks attempted to process the combination of Queen's operatic rock, jumping kittens, and humans dramatically flipping food in flaming pans. Their shields are dropping. Representative Lyra called from her tactical station, her feathers puffing with excitement. The combination of sonic pulses and human culture is overloading their systems. Council Leader Val, who had insisted on remaining in the command center, watched in amazement as her tendrils changed colors with each new human transmission. Are they broadcasting something called Dancing with the Stars to the enemy flagship? Psychological warfare at its finest, Sterling confirmed, grinning as she directed another barrage. Nothing confuses an advanced hive mind quite like trying to understand why humans voluntarily compete through choreographed movement. The Harvester fleet's formation had completely broken down. Ships that had once moved with perfect synchronization now moved erratically, their command structure disrupted by the barrage of human cultural transmissions and Council sonic attacks. Admiral Sterling Nex called out, her head crest rising in sudden inspiration. "What would happen if we combined our sonic pulses with something your people call heavy metal?" Sterling's grin grew wider. "Let's find out." Queuing up Metallica's greatest hits now. The combined attack created what several Council scientists would later describe as a cultural sonic boom. The Harvester fleet's remaining coordination shattered as their neural networks faced the impossible task of processing thrash metal amplified by alien harmonics. Their retreating representative Koro announced, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. The Harvesters are actually retreating. As the enemy fleet fled through their spatial tier, Admiral Sterling's voice carried across all channels. "Should we show them what happens when we combine your sonic capabilities with disco?" "Please don't," Nex replied dryly. "I think we've committed enough war crimes for one day." The Council chamber erupted in celebration. Species that had previously feared even being in the same room as humans were now enthusiastically attempting to recreate human high fives with varying degrees of success. 1 week later, the Council convened a special session to address the aftermath of what media outlets had dubbed the Battle of the Bands. Admiral Nex stood before the assembly, her formal uniform adorned with both Council medals and a human achievement pin featuring a small coffee cup. In light of recent events, she announced, "I propose we create a new classification for humanity. They're clearly not just Deathworlders, they're something entirely different." Agreed. Council Leader Val's tendrils swayed thoughtfully. But what classification could possibly encompass a species that defeats cosmic threats with musical preferences and cooking broadcasts? "I have a suggestion," came Admiral Sterling's voice as she entered the chamber, causing only minimal panic among the representatives. "How about friends?" The word hung in the air for a moment before Nex's translator processed it. Her head crest rose in amusement. A remarkably simple classification for such a complex species. "Sometimes the simple answer is the best one," Sterling replied, then held up a large container. "Speaking of which, who wants to try something we call pizza? We made sure to keep the temperature below the vaporization point of most Council species eating implements this time." The chamber watched in fascination as Sterling began distributing pieces of what appeared to be a flat bread covered in various substances. Representative Lyra was the first to try it, her feathers changing to a brilliant purple of pleasure at the taste. "We should update the emergency response protocols," Nex suggested to Council Leader Val as they watched the impromptu cultural exchange unfold. "Add a section about checking our spam filters during invasions." "Already done," Val replied, her tendrils reaching cautiously for a slice of pizza. Though I'm more concerned about the human suggestion to establish regular cultural exchange programs, they want to introduce something called karaoke to the council recreational facilities. It could be worse, Nex observed, watching a group of representatives attempting to recreate human dance moves. They could have suggested teaching us about their holiday traditions. I've read the reports about something called Halloween. Sterling overheard this and grinned. Just wait until you learn about competitive pumpkin launching. We've got some ideas about combining it with your species' sonic capabilities. As Nex watched humans and council members mingling, sharing food and stories, she couldn't help but appreciate the irony. They had feared humans for their resilience, their strength, their ability to survive against all odds. But in the end, it wasn't their capacity for survival that made them remarkable. It was their ability to turn anything, even fear itself, into a reason to celebrate. You know, Sterling said, offering Nex something called a pepperoni slice. We're still trying to figure out how to combine your sonic harmonics with dubstep. Want to help us create the ultimate defensive weapon? Nex's head crest rose in what she realized was now amusement rather than alarm. As long as we agree never to use it in combination with your cat videos. I'm pretty sure that would violate several intergalactic treaties. Deal. Sterling laughed. Now, has anyone told you about our traditional Earth game called karaoke?